Good morning, all, or happy lunchtime for my friends in Southdowns and others of you living in the future. And welcome to Kalbardr's Corner for this episode of Coffee with Kal. I am Lord Kalbardr Gellir, Companion of the Meridian Cross, Companion of the Argent Comet, Companion of the Argent Lamp, Companion of Falcon's Faith, and Reaper, coming to you live, as always, from the Barony of the Osprey on the southern coast of Meridies. Now, for this episode, I am joined by two lovely ladies representing the known world Courtesans Guild, Domina Lucretia Lepida and Minsu Yun. Good morning, ladies.
Good morning.
So I'd like both of you, if you will, to introduce yourselves. Tell us a little about who you are and where you're from.
You can go first.
I am Domina Lucretia Lepida. That is my warm weather courtesan persona. I also have cool weather patron persona, Lady GLaDOS Vachan. So if you've run into GLaDOS, the tiny GLaDOS, that's also me. And I have been a member of the known world courtesans for a few years, and I'm one of the founding members of the Courtesans of Trimaris.
Hello, everyone. I am Minsu Yun. I am a Korean courtesan, actually, my persona called a Gisang. And I have been part of the known world courtesans for a couple years now. And also the autocrat for the upcoming event, the Courtesans College. So
there you go. All right. And so, of course, since today's show is coffee themed, we have to talk about our coffees or other assorted drinks for those weirdos who don't drink coffee.
That's me. There. I feel called out. That's me.
Okay. That was my one. Okay.
It's okay. So, I can take it.
Today, I am drinking Blueberry Cobbler by New England Coffee. And of course, I'm drinking it out of my Feed the Ravens mug from my Westie Besties. So what about you ladies? What are you drinking this morning?
I have the very, very classy upscale brand. You might have heard of it. Folgers.
Nice.
And that's about it. It's not a weird flavor or anything.
Just Folgers regular. You know,
just Folgers regular.
Nothing wrong with a classic, man.
I am the weirdo not drinking coffee. I have an elixir from my doctor, and I have this fantastic Pennsic mug that Minsu Yun provided me.
Ooh, Pennsic mugs, very nice.
Yes.
Yeah. All righty, so we have a bunch of folks watching in the comments. So first of all, hey everybody out there, thank you for joining us. If you're in the comments, make sure you introduce yourself. Let us know you're watching. Let us know what you're drinking, and throughout the show, if you have questions, comments, I've even told if you have an inflammatory question, throw it out there. We will happily field those as they come up. So we were an open show, and I was told I need to go ahead and put that on the bottom of the screen. So we'll go ahead and just throw that on there. So we may have some offensive language. So I've been warned, and so now have you. All right, so let's dig into our topic. So today's topic is courtesans in the SCA. So I think starting off with what is a courtesan, and then what is the known world Courtesans Guild. I'll let you ladies field that one.
Well, we have sort of a standard explanation, but then we'll get more into what we're about. So the known world courtesans is a free confederation of reenactors who have chosen a pre-1600 sex worker as our persona, along with our patrons, our bodyguards, and any of our entourage that may accompany us. So we have space in the guild for people with all kinds of interests and different personas. Many of them are courtesans, but not all of the members of our guild are courtesans. We do acknowledge also our patrons and our entourages. And as courtesans, we educate about historical sex workers. We also stand in solidarity with modern sex workers against sexism, misogyny, whorephobia, homophobia, transphobia, racism, classism, and all other forms of discrimination. And we have a website, knownworldcourtesans.org. So after the show, if you're interested, you can definitely come and check us out, find out more about what we're doing.
Now we'll put that in the comments as well. So.
Awesome.
Knownworldcourtesans.org. If I can spell that correctly, yes, that is correct.
With an E on the end of known or world or known. It's known.
E on the end of known. I got fussed out about that one already. I had to go back and fix the show graphic because I missed the E.
Oh, the E is very important. The E is very important.
I did not realize how important that one letter was, but apparently it is a thing. So that was the first point of the show I had to fix. So
there you go. Well, thank you.
Of course. And I think it's an important thing, and this is one of those, like, especially with y'all's focus of let me say the discriminated against, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those little things often matter so much more than those of us in a privileged place think of.
Yes.
So whereas it's a stupid E. It doesn't really actually matter. It matters
Right.
to you guys, therefore it matters.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's something that we, in our research and in our choices we make with our personas and how we portray ourselves, we try to really honor those stories about people who sort of slip through the cracks of history, because that's where sex workers were. A lot of times they were marginalized people, and we try to honor that and recognize it by sharing their stories and keeping them keeping them in people's minds, because people have an incredible tendency to think that things like sex and non-traditional identities and non-traditional relationships were all invented in the 60s or maybe even the 80s. So we're here to just be a very visible presence to remind people that that is not the case, that human sexuality and marginalized identities and non-traditional ways of being have always been part of the human experience and always will be. So we might as well, embrace that and try to treat everyone with humanity.
You can just keep talking.
Okay. I really can. You may regret this.
No,
this is why I invited her specifically.
Yeah, I don't need to be here for this show. You can handle this. I love this. This is amazing. I was like, this is just, I'll sit here and listen. This is awesome. Okay, so let's dig into okay, so first of all, I want to address this right up front. So the red veils. What's with the red veil? What for you guys is the red veil? And of course, I'm wearing my red hat today in solidarity with because I am myself a member of the Courtesans Guild. I am a patron and I guess a bodyguard as well. So
yeah, and we are absolutely glad to have you in our family and love the display of solidarity. So the red veils are something that we embraced throughout most time periods where there was officially recognized forms of sex work that were sanctioned by the government or at least recognized by some sort of state entity. There was usually some sort of sumptuary law requiring that women, or actually not just women, as it's something we'll get into as we go along, but that courtesans or any kind of sex worker would identify themselves. Now, sometimes those were striped veils, sometimes those were badges, sometimes those were specific garments of clothing. Roman sex workers would wear a toga, which is a male garment. So that was something that sort of set them apart visually. And it's also good marketing, I'm just going to say, to be a visible sex worker. People then know where to find you and get your services. So we chose the red veil as a universal for the known world courtesans. It's not so much based off of the fact that every sex worker in history wore a red veil, because there's no kind of universal like that across all cultures, other than the fact that sex work existed across all cultures. So we chose the red veil from lots of different options just because we thought it was something that is very bright. It definitely sets us apart, and people can incorporate that into their persona's portrayal however they want to. So I have my little Roman bun sort of veil, and then Min Soo-yeon has a lovely veil that she wears over that phenomenal hat she has on. And
she always has the best hats, man. I love all of her hats. It makes me happy.
Oh, you know what I want really bad is a boot hat. I want a Russian boot hat so bad. By the way,
you have the best hats. And always will. So that's something that we kind of chose as a sort of universal representation of our particular courtesan group. And that way people know when they're finding someone with the gold stag or with the red veil, they know that they found a known world courtesan member or associate, and that we can get them involved with our group and or just reach out and educate about something that may be needed. And that can be anything from, dancing tips through to consent culture. We do a lot of education about safer sex topics as well, relationship stuff. So we have a kind of a grab bag between modern and historical. We have our historical things that we research, and then we also have sort of modern safety things that we also teach, and we cover the whole gamut. Much like please.
Oh, something I was going to add is the red veil is also very useful for people who have more than one persona, and one persona might be a courtesan and the other might not be.
Yes.
And so it is a physical marker of when you're on the job. so that when you're like in your, kitchen clothes, cooking, people don't like come in and go like, hey, you want to go to that party with me? Or something like that.
Yeah.
So it's a good way to like, turn it on and off. And
yeah, when I'm in my patron persona, I usually just will wear a pin somewhere. Just to like, and as opposed to wearing the red veil, I usually just wear the red veil when I'm actually in my courtesan persona as Lucretia Lepida.
This is a fabulous name, by the way. I just like that.
Thank you very much.
And you say it way better than I do. It's the way you roll it is just you have to do the roll or it doesn't work as well. So
and it took me a long time to get used to it, and also a long time before someone clued me in to classical Roman pronunciation enough that I knew what I was going for. So that it's a labor of love, my pronunciation of my name. But actually, then this is fun. There is a wonderful lady who is an associate and supporter of ours. And she is a Laurel. She's a Roman Laurel, so she goes by Magistra, but she also is a Lucretia. And so her household is all Lucretiae. And we now have a sort of informal, it's not an official on the books thing, but we have an informal Lucretiae household of courtesans and sex workers. So we like to call ourselves a gang.
A gang of Lucretias. I like it. Okay.
A gang of Lucretiae.
I'm scared, frankly, of that. Actually, I'm a little terrified.
You haven't even met the other Lucretiae, and honestly, that is a good reaction.
Don't need to.
So when people learn my name, I'm like, you have to learn Lepida, because if you walk over to my camp and my at the Renaissance Village at Gulf Wars and you yell Lucretia, you're gonna get like at least 3 people, possibly more, that respond to you.
The herd of them coming at you.
What?
I mean, that's an easy way to call a little house meeting, though.
That's true. Lucretia.
It's like the Avengers. You just yell a symbol and it works. So.
We do that in Trimaris, actually, for our Courtesan Guild in Trimaris is still pretty small. But when we're at events and we want to have a meeting, we'll usually just yell like fabulous hookers assemble. Or we're told maybe not to refer to ourselves as something that is a mundane illegal activity. So I said, can we say it in Latin? And they said, yeah, if you say it in a different language that's not English, you can say anything you want. So now we yell fabulous corta, which is a very, very derogatory name for a sex worker in Rome. And like very derogatory, but we just like to sort of embrace that we don't see anything negative in any of those terms. We understand that in history, necessarily, there were quite a few things negative that those people may have experienced, but who they were and the job they did or were forced to do wasn't a bad thing. Sure. No matter being forced to do any job is a problem. It's not the job, it's the forcing. So that's kind of our way of embracing it with all of the gritty details is to also bring in some of the, and remember, so scorta actually means like skin. It's a very derogatory term for a sex worker. But I think that, and this is something where I may differ from my other courtesan KWC members, because I have my very own strong, but as you might imagine, a Courtesans Guild is full of very strong, opinionated people who have very deep convictions and ideas about what they're talking about. So for me personally, and I want to specify me personally, I feel like using some of that derogatory language from the past helps to remind us of the fact that we are portraying people who were deeply stigmatized in the past. And one of the best things I think that we can do is say, it doesn't matter what kind of dirty name you call someone who's a sex worker. They are a person who deserves dignity. And even though we use those terms in a joking way, reminding yourself of the roughness and the harshness that those people experienced historically, I think is a valuable thing to keep us, humble's not the right word, but focused on where we should be, so that we're not, cultural appropriation isn't the right term, but I feel like even though we only portray the Middle Ages as it should have been, I think that's important for us to know what they were really like historically, so that when someone says something like courtesans didn't really have sex for money, we can say They did. They were sex workers. We're not going to fuck around, and we're not going to talk around the fact that they were sex workers to make you feel more comfortable because you aren't okay with the fact that they were sex workers.
Well,
we're not going to sanitize people's lives, people's real lived experiences, because modern sensibilities have decided that it's not okay to admit those things.
Yeah, and that really kind of, there's a word, depromotes the hierarchy, because if we're like, oh, you are really just this thing, we have less people who are like, well, we aren't like those people,
right?
Because we don't want people to go like, well, I'm better than this person who's literally doing the same thing, except they are as educated in the historical sense.
And we do. And the other thing I think is important is that we call ourselves the known world courtesans, but we do embrace any sex worker persona of any type, any gender identity, any clientele. So if your persona that you want to portray is any kind of sex worker, we have space for you. And that does mean that we have personas in our group that are technically slave personas. Slave sex worker, actually, like in a Roman context, which I know obviously the most about, but in a Roman context, being a slave was an inherently sexualized thing. It was an inherently sexualized position in society because you were an object. And that means you could be a sexual object as well at the choosing of your owner. So obviously, someone who chooses to portray an enslaved sex worker from the past, they're still doing it as it should have been. Do you know what I mean? So they're still portraying the life of someone who is well treated and well cared for. And they can then get into some of those little known facts about like Roman slavery, for example. Like sometimes Roman slaves were paid, but they couldn't own property. So their owners would actually keep like savings for them. And then someday when they were manumitted, they were given that money. And so they were actually, I mean, I'm sure it wasn't like a market wage, but they were actually paid. Or oftentimes, if you were incredibly wealthy, you might educate your slaves just to show off that you could afford educated slaves. So, and also, slaves were very valuable. Like there obviously are many different levels of slavery in ancient Rome, but a slave that knew all of the noble families and who to talk to bribe and what kind of bribes to give to what families, that was a very valuable thing. And you know, it's sort of like if you have and this is horrible to equate humans to objects, but for a Roman mindset, you don't like take care of your cell phone. Like you need all that information. It's very valuable to you. So that slave would have been well treated and they would have been a valuable part of your household. And that's something that unless you get into researching the lives of real slaves and being honest about what it was, you have a much more limited view of what that institution was like within a Roman context, but also almost a sanitized view of what that life was. Because if you know the best, you also know that the vast majority of people were not providing the best for their slaves.
Yeah. So in response to that, my courtesan persona, the Giesang, is actually a sex slave persona. They were owned by the government. And so what they would do is there was an official school run by the government that would teach these young ladies to be Giesang. And depending on how well you did, you either got a really nice, sort of life as much as you can in the capital working for royalty, or you could be sent to a random village in the middle of nowhere with with very little prospects and opportunities. So there's definitely it's very fascinating to me to like look into that and be able to talk about those nuances to being owned by an entity and what that would have been like, especially since they would retire at the ripe old age of like 27 or 29, and so you have to like look at it and go like, okay, so what do you do for like the rest of your like life?
Yeah, although sadly a lot of historical courtesans don't live very long, healthy lives. A lot of them died very young. And and a lot of them, because they lived on the margins, sometimes they just sort of disappear and we don't really hear from them, and we don't know what happened to them later in their lives, because the eye of history is mostly focused through what men thought was important to write down, and specifically like privileged, wealthy men. So obviously after a courtesan has sort of aged up, like they may not be very interested in telling her story anymore. But that doesn't mean she doesn't still have a story to tell. And that is that's where the creative part of our SCA journey comes in. Right. And we do sort of fill in those gaps with educated guesses or specific choices. My courtesan persona is a Roman ductapuela, which is not actually an official thing. It was sort of like a professional muse or a sugar daddy kind of relationship. But my persona specifically is incredibly wealthy on her own. So sort of like her nighttime hobby to go out and inspire poets and artisans and painters with her conversation and her personality. And she's not necessarily engaged in it for the money. She likes the actual experience of doing it. And we have another courtesan who is in Trimaris. I almost said works in Trimaris. In Trimaris, and she runs a brothel. So she's Elena, and she runs an actual brothel of slave prostitutes. And so we have. And then also we have someone, she actually moved out of Kingdom recently, but when we first started the group in Trimaris, we actually had someone who was one of her slave sex workers in her brothel. So we had like the whole gamut. And so I'm the rich heiress sort of, and I come and hang out with her because that's where I can hang out with other women who have education and will talk to me about stuff. So they're far more fun than my other Roman noble ladies who try to be proper all the time.
There's no fun in that. Don't be proper all the time.
No, not all the time. Not all the time. But I was always very inspired by like Catullus and Ovid and some of those other Roman poetry. And Catullus especially has amazing poems about sex and about sex workers. There's one about us, and I'm not quite sure what the original Latin is because I'm still learning Latin, but in the modern translations, the prostitute steals his pocketbook and he goes back with his friends and he yells at her to get his money back. So there's all kinds of stories out there. And when I read that poem, I always think, did this really happen, Catullus, or are you just covering for the fact that you don't want to admit what your nighttime hobbies are? So yep. That's something in our research, we see all of these gaps and sort of missing areas in the lives of these marginalized people. And so when we come across that poem where the man is cursing out a sex worker for some crazy reason, we're like, you're only telling one side to this story. And that makes it much more glaringly obvious what's going on. So I did want to say, and it's an important thing, we don't provide sexual services for money, mundanely, or in any, well, mundanely, because we obviously role play that. But that's the same way that fighters don't really kill each other. They don't even really hate each other. They're not really at war. So if people can role play being at war and killing people, we role play being sex workers and entertaining people. And so I think that is just sort of, it's something people sometimes have a really hard time wrapping their mind around, but at the same time, it's just our way of engaging with the dream and our way of portraying our little corner of it.
Right. So yeah. So let's sort of declare that again. So this is a like the rest of the SCA. We're a bunch of role players, folks. We're LARPers. Let's just throw that out there. I know people hate that term. We are live action role playing. It's a thing.
I support it because I feel like if we acknowledge we're a LARP, then we can all be on the same page.
Right.
That this is an amazingly beautiful, very elaborate game of pretend.
Right. It is improv theater. If you want to be fancy, it's improv theater. That's what it is. Okay. So as courtesans, you do not, at least as part of your courtesan personas, I'm not going to. I know you will not speak for, and I will not speak for the rest of the guild.
Right.
None of the guild has ever taken money for sex. We have sex work is a thing, and that's what you do. That's awesome. Do that. But as part of your courtesan persona within the SCA, there is no money exchange for sex. Hard stop.
Absolutely.
Period. Okay.
Yeah, hard stop, period.
Because that is currently illegal, and that is why. If it were not illegal, then that might be just a different discussion. But currently, it is illegal in this country. That's the point of that.
Right. Well, if you are a cook in the SCA and you make big, beautiful feasts, you're not really, scoppy. But if you are a caterer in your mundane life, that literally has nothing to do with it. That's your mundane life.
Right.
So whatever people do in their mundane life, we support them. Whether it's illegal or not, we support them. But as courtesans, as part of our SCA personas, we do not provide any sexual services for money. I actually am one of the courtesans who sort of, I have contracts for all of my patrons. And one of the things in there is like a clause. So it's like, yes, I know this is on Google Docs. And by the way, if someone is looking, this is explicitly spelled out to be purely about these personas relating in a fictional game type setting and does not relate. Because also, if I have a wonderful relationship with someone as a patron when we're at SCA events, but I meet up with them in a coffee shop and they are absolutely intolerable and rude and treat me in ways that I am not okay being treated, that's more important to me than whatever niceties you're able to pretend at events, so real life always trumps the game. And that's another reason why I think it's important to embrace the fact that we're LARPing, is it helps us see the boundaries and all have the same boundaries.
Correct. So I guess let's dig into what do you do as courtesans? What are the things at an event, right? And when you're in your persona, you're with your patrons, you're with your supporters. What are the things? What are the activities? What are the ways that you express that as a courtesan at an event?
That's a little bit different for every courtesan. Sure. And that's part of the portraying it the way it should have been. In our case, courtesans do what they want to do. Sex workers engage in work the way they want to. So you may be someone who is a performer. And so your primary mode of expressing your courtesanry is through singing and dancing or performing music in some way. Myself, I am more about company. And accompanying someone, good conversation, someone to, if you're the sort of person who absolutely hates being like alone at a party, you can make a contract with me. And if I enjoy your company as well, such that I will not be annoyed to be at the party with you, I can go along and keep you company. And so I focus on conversation. I consider my primary courtesan art to be conversation. But also we host a lot of salons and other social events like that. And that's very much a part of what we do as well. I do also European medieval dancing, and that is one of my first loves in the society. So that to me, I don't see it as a performance. It's about the fact that we can dance together and we can share dances and we can engage in that social activity together. So it's again about companionship, not performance. For me personally, even though I can sing, I can dance, I can do all those things, I'm not there to perform. I'm there to share my vivacious personality and lighten up your life a little bit for a little while.
Fair enough. What about you, Sion? How do you express yours at an event?
So for me, I am mostly a performer. So I sing and do music and poetry, as my persona would have done. And I also, one thing that I like to focus on is, as a courtesan, I can be almost a patron to ANS and fighters, as a courtesan would do in period. So I will often, host competitions, host a salon for a fighter side salon where, you can drop off your gear, have people fan you off, get fed and watered as you do. Additionally, I focus on what exactly my persona would be doing to prepare for retirement. Right. And stuff like that. Specifically for my persona, the Gisang, there was only a few things that you could do after you retire. And two of those things is you could become a tailor, because you could actually measure women. Or you could become a healer, because again, you could actually look at your female patients and diagnose them, whereas male healers wouldn't be able to go into that female space. So I focus on those things as a way to say, I am a courtesan right now because I'm not past that retirement age, but I'm getting ready for that retirement and what it looks like after that. And what
As any wise businesswoman would.
Yes, yes.
Planning for tomorrow. That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's actually something that I really like about the courtesan is that a courtesan is an entrepreneur. A
Right.
courtesan is a female business owner, or a marginalized person who owns a business or is a business person. And it was work. It was a job. And so I very much, and as someone who is a small business owner in real life, I think that that's a really like fun way to portray a woman from history who also has that same enterprising, entrepreneurially ambitious spirit for herself. And there are lots and lots of stories. Actually, we have one on one of the episodes of the podcast that's one of my favorite courtesan stories, but there's actually a square in Rome that is named after a Venetian courtesan to this day. And people don't necessarily know, but they're walking through a square named after this courtesan who managed to endear herself to various wealthy patrons, and then used a lot of that money, especially in her later life, to secure a very prestigious relationship with the church and a great deal of land and holdings that she then passed on variously to the church or to her offspring. So she was able to provide not only for herself, for a comfortable life, and she is one of those that sort of fades out of history, but she provides a good life for herself. She provides stability for her children, and she also is able to provide an alliance with the church, which especially in Italy would have been a very powerful alliance to have. So that's
Right.
It's really amazing, sort of the places where you'll see these sort of undocumented lives peek through, and then you'll go, well, what is this square named after? And I can't remember her last name, but her first name I'm fairly certain is Fiammetta.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But we definitely have different people doing things. You could have a courtesan just to talk to at feasts. You could have a courtesan host your party, because one of the things we focus on is creating a safe space for imbibing.
Sure.
Because it's not, you want people to go home safe.
Right, which
And,
is another thing that people, even if they're not engaged in our community, if they see that we're hosting an event, they can come and know that the space we're providing is safe, and that we have people who are actively watching to make sure everyone is conducting themselves chivalrously, which is, at the end of the day, there's a lot of people who talk about bringing modern politics in it, but it's not chivalrous to punch down. It's chivalrous to punch up. So if people are already downtrodden, you don't need to be trotting upon them further. And that's sort of one of the primary ethics that sort of underlies what we do, is that we provide those safe spaces where we're mindful of those power dynamics and try to make sure people, and it can be anything from just having a nice place for conversation and someone says some really like awful devaluing joke about some group of people, and you just kind of say, oh, that's not the sort of joke we tell here. We don't find them very funny, through to like, there is a drunk 16-year-old crying in the bathroom and having a life crisis, and we need to find out if something has happened to her that needs to be addressed with the constabulary and the people in charge, the seneschal in charge of the event, or if she just really needs to talk about how she broke up with her boyfriend. And you don't know until you go in that bathroom and you sit and talk with that very drunk 16-year-old. So we handle a lot of different situations and we do a lot of different things, but they all kind of amorphously intersect. But that is also in that specific, because you can possibly tell that the crying 16-year-old is a thing that actually happened to me. And I was with other courtesans at the time, and they're like, "Oh, Lepida, you go," because I was the one where that fit my courtesan, profile, my courtesan skills. So I was in the bathroom with her, and it was a boyfriend thing ultimately, but we didn't know, we weren't sure until we went to talk to her. And you don't, if you think something is amiss, it doesn't hurt to go check it out. You know, the worst thing that's going to happen is you're going to end up giving some poor 16-year-old advice while she's drunk or he's drunk or they're drunk, you know. It's never going to be, I feel like it's rarely going to be a detriment to have a friendly person pop in and just check in, make sure everything's okay, you know?
Yeah. And then a lot of us tend to be a part of the, you know, part or support the LGBTQ community, in sex positivity and body positivity. So we've often had salons that are, you know, focused on things like consent 101. What does consent look like? Or, you know, what, you know, here is about gender. You know, here's a discussion about gender, both in a modern context and historical context, because as we know, gender hasn't always been like, it changes a lot in different cultures. And
I would say it never has been a strict
it's
duo,
never been a strict.
and it isn't currently.
Yeah.
It's almost like it's not supposed to be.
Right? Right?
Yeah. Like one of the classes in the Courtesans College this week is actually about trans sex workers in historical India. And, you know, not an Indian persona or anything, but you know I'm going to go to that class because I want to know about this. Right. And then we also do things such as do fundraisers for, you know, promoting modern sex workers, the Red Umbrella Project. Is that right?
Oh, yeah.
Yes. And supporting LGBTQ and all these different things. And it just makes me so happy to be in this community that is so focused on helping people be happy and be comfortable with the way that they truly want to be.
So it seems to function both as a role-playing thing for, we're having fun at events, getting to have fun with people, cool, but also as an activism. It's an activist group, right? So that's really neat that you guys can do that as a, you know, to have fun with it, because you often see people that are in these activism groups, whereas they have fun doing it because they enjoy being activists in their mundane lives. It's not always it's just work. It becomes just work every day. Like, y'all get to have fun with it, but then also show the positive sides of what was a really shitty place in history.
Right. Well, sometimes
right. I mean,
there are sex workers in history who are very happy with their situation, and actually, I can't remember her name, but there is a Greek Hetarai who actually was. They talk about how she was possibly one of the richest people in the world that they knew of. Yes, because she was a very entrepreneurial lady, and she saved her money, and she actually gave donations to temples that were so large that her name went down in history for her giant donations to different temples and religious organizations in the Greek world. So and this is a post-period, you know, modern world example, but it was sex workers in the American West who first had the money and the mobility and the allowance. Like they didn't have a husband telling them they couldn't go out and like advocate for women's voting rights. So you know what they did? They took their money and they went out and they advocated for women's voting rights. And that actually, in American history, if you look, that's why you'll see women getting the vote in like Montana or some random Western state far before places that were more civilized, because there were women who were free and had the money to go out and advocate for themselves. And that is something that a lot of sex workers in history do as well, is they have their money and then they try to use it to help other sex workers who might not be in as good of a situation. So like my persona, the super wealthy heiress type, I go out at the, you know, the Lena or the brothel that my dear friend Elena runs. But if I would think a person like that, in the best possible way, as we portray in the SCA, she would use her money and her status to maybe provide a nice retirement for the slaves working in the brothel, or to manumit them when they became old enough that they weren't appropriate for brothel work anymore, manumit them so they were free people, and also have the resources to set them up in a nice life, and also has the social status to be their patron, and not in a Roman societal sense, not in a courtesan sex worker sense, which would set them up towards being able to be legitimate business owners and members of the mercantile class in Rome, which was a big deal and not the easiest thing to break into. So there's different ways. We have a lot of courtesans who patronize other courtesans in a like mentor-mentee type of fashion, or in a even working girls need the time when someone is there for them. And I also want to say we are both cisgender ladies, but there are so many different gender identities, and we have male sex workers that work for male clients. We have male sex workers who work for female clients. We have male sex workers who work for anybody. We have non-binary sex workers who work for only other non-binary people. Like, it's very much within your choice, because again, this is portraying it as it should be, which is also, I think, a valuable example, because sex work still does exist. And I think we could all do a little more thinking about what those people deserve, the life they deserve to have, and the recognition and safety that they deserve to have, if the modern world were as it should be.
Right. Agreed.
And I want to bring up one thing, just because it has been brought up to me several times, and it's something that is in the news a lot lately, is human trafficking or sex trafficking. And that's something that's been brought up to us, that we, at certain points by some people, that we are encouraging it. And I just like to point out that at the end of the day, a person who has been sex trafficked has still been forced to do what is considered to be illegal work. And if you remove the illegality of that work that they've been forced to do, and you remove the stigma of the fact that they have done a particular job while they were being trafficked, you help them. You know, a big problem with working against sex trafficking in America historically has been the fact that we did not recognize them as victims. We recognized them as prostitutes, as criminals. Yeah. And that didn't matter if they were under the age of consent or not. That stigma and that criminality would still apply to them. So if we, for example, in America were to decriminalize sex work and prostitution, then people who have been trafficked into that would start to make it easier for them to move on with their lives and not have that stigma attached to them for something they didn't even choose. So I think it puts the focus back on the fact that forced work is not acceptable in any job, and no job makes you a bad person if it's a job society needs doing. So, you know, I don't think that there's anything wrong with being a garbage man either, because you know what? I like that the streets aren't full of trash. Right.
Somebody has to pick it up. I can't. I can't grab that big truck. I know.
I can't wash dishes without kind of gagging in my mouth. So I'm really glad other people can. You know, that's life.
Yeah. And if you're interested more in that aspect of, you know, what human trafficking looks like, how to help, the Horticulture podcast actually has 2 whole episodes about that.
Yes.
You know, that features the wonderful Lepida. So
the podcast has been on hiatus for a while, because I went on hiatus for self-care, and then the world exploded in a pandemic, and that's super stressful just to live through. So I do have some recordings in the bag. It will come back at some point. It's just, life is rough right now. But we have 2 episodes, and actually there's 2 2-part episodes that I would really recommend everyone check out if they're concerned. If you're concerned about human trafficking, definitely check out our 2-part episode on that. I talked with someone who actually has been there unloading a shipping container of trafficked people in Somalia. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So people who have actually been on the ground doing the work of liberating trafficked people. And we talk about human trafficking, how it relates to sex trafficking, how to help, what to watch for. And we give actual factual things. And I'm not going to get into it, but there's a lot of bullshit about human trafficking and child sex trafficking going on in the general zeitgeist right now, and none of it is helpful. None of it is helpful because it does not destigmatize sex work, as in freeing the people who have been trafficked into it from that stigma. It doesn't do anything about that. It perpetrates the idea that if you've been trafficked into sex work, your life is over and you're used goods. And fuck that just forever. Because there is no such thing as a person that is used goods. There is no such thing. No matter how old you are, no matter what you've been through, your life is yours and you deserve the opportunity to make it everything you want it to be. So fuck that in general. I got really distracted by how passionate I was about that, and I forgot where I was going.
Take a breath. There we go.
Yeah.
If you haven't noticed, us courtesans tend to be very passionate about it.
There are opinions to be had, clearly.
Yes.
So I linked the podcast into the Facebook or the chat there.
Awesome.
Also, so just for the record, when I opened it up, it was funny that if you want something a little less heavy to start with than the sex trafficking episode, the first episode listed there is the big old boob episode.
Oh yeah, the big old boob episode is really good.
That's the one I'm listening to first because that sounds like a party time to me.
Yeah, we also have a really fantastic episode about gay male culture in Andalusia, in Muslim Andalusia, and it is amazing. It is awesome. And we have a lot of really great, like, sort of gems like that. But there is another two-parter that I recommend. I really think is very important for us in the SCA to be more aware of, where I talked to a sociologist about how abusive situations or a sexual assault or rape and how to handle that within an insular community. And she has a lot of really illuminating, and she also is someone who comes from, when she was young, she participated in the SCA and other sort of like groups. So she actually comes from our community and is able to use her professional expertise to talk about how we could be addressing these things. And we actually go through the harassment policy and the process for submitting complaints. And we talk about ways that it could be improved or ways people could just implement it better. So it's something that every Scadian can listen to, or honestly, everyone in some kind of insular group who cares about making it a safer place for everyone to play.
Yeah, no, there's I was looking through the episodes. There's a ton of good episodes out there, and clearly a ton of knowledge coming from people like Lepida here. So I think definitely check that out. Also, we had a question come up. Did you just use the word zeitgeist?
I did use the word zeitgeist.
Yes, you did, and properly, might I add. I think that is the first time zeitgeist has been used on this channel, but well done, dear.
Thank you.
That's funny.
I'm here for it. I'm here for the crazy words.
That's a good one. It's a good word. Okay, so so I have some questions, I guess, so to bring us back to the SCA function here. So you've talked a couple times about being paid and sex workers being paid and things like that. We mentioned we're not exchanging real money, and a lot of times, so I come at this from the gambling perspective, right? So I run games. Mm-hmm. We don't use any real American currency or Canadian currency or Mexican currency. Like I won't use any real life currency, at least modern currency, in any games we run. Mm-hmm. But we still have to have something to gamble with. So we find trinkets and baubles and old weird coins. We mint our own coins or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. So from a sex worker perspective, you have to get paid in some form or fashion, right? So what do you guys do for the monetary exchange in that to sort of stay within the legal thing, obviously, for your services?
We do something very similar to that. I've gotten salt before and people's minted coins before, beads. I've gotten earrings once. That was really nice. But sometimes it's also through services. For example, you might say, I will go to a party with you, but you have to bring me coffee in the morning, fresh brewed coffee. Because who doesn't want to wake up and go out of your tent and have coffee already for you? One thing that I'm going to word name her, Justina actually does that I always thought was really nice is she asked to be paid by the person by having them do something for the kingdom.
Right.
So that's something else that you could do as a courtesan and say, I will do this thing with you, but you must sponsor an A&S competition. You must do something that's good for the kingdom, or bring me coffee in the morning. It doesn't necessarily have to be even the baubles, but the baubles are really nice. I like getting little tiny things of salt. Like,
I specifically like SCA fiat currency because I have a little carved wooden box at my home, and whenever I get coins, I put them in my box, and I like to just shake it and listen to all those coins in there. So that is something that brings me a great deal of pleasure. So my preferred payment is actually SCA fiat currency, or historical reproduction coinage. And I do have a nice little selection. I have like some Venetian coins. I have some Florentine coins. I have a coin that I was lucky enough to receive from His Former Majesty of Ansiora in return for teaching my Courtesans 101 class. And I also have some Roman coins. So I have a like array, and I look forward to having more and more shiny coins to shake in my box. But that's something that's also very individual. As an independent entrepreneur, as a free agent, you are able to set your own terms and bargain for whatever sort of payment you would like. And that also, at least in Trimaris, it's funny, we all are doing what we're doing and what we want to do anyway. And there is one courtesan who loves to give foot massages, and we always joke that she does it, without getting paid. And so I follow along, and I'm like, okay, let me negotiate the payment here. So I'm the contract negotiator.
You're the muscle coming behind to get the money. I got you. Okay.
I'm not the muscle. I'm just the notification that the bill is due. The muscle is this is something we came up with. We were starting to figure out how to implement before the lockdown. So obviously it hasn't happened yet, but we are going to sponsor a rapier tournament. And the prize for the rapier tournament is that you win the honor of being our muscle for the year.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. We think that's, only appropriate. It's a good way to, bring in fighting community into our thing, recognize the work that that the rapier community is doing to add to the dream, and also to form a little bit of an alliance there, working alliance. So
it's less of a tournament, more of an audition at that point then.
Yeah. But it is an honor to be our muscle. So and actually we've had a few gentlemen fight for us, and we always specify, do not fight for our honor, fight for our glory. We have plenty of honor on our own. We don't need someone to fight for our honor. We don't need anyone to prove that we're honorable, because we're as honorable as we feel like being. But our glory, now you can fight for our glory and proclaim our glory from the high hills. That's allowed.
I like that. So to go back to what Su Young brought up. So Justina is one of her patrons during lockdown. Because he had not had a chance to repay his previous debt, he hosted the Mariposa tournament. It was something he did in the kingdom, and he and a few others gave out some pretty decent prizes actually for improving your kit and improving your look. And I thought it was a really neat way to do that. And I appreciate this. That's something she does as her persona to give back to the kingdom. So it's sort of instead of her giving back directly, she gives back through other people, because it's it sort of spreads that love, I guess, of that. And that's a really neat way to do that.
I have occasionally demanded that people enter ANS tournaments,
right?
Because I have a tendency to find people who are amazing artisans and amazing minds who don't necessarily fully value themselves.
Right.
And sometimes what it takes is someone else saying, listen, if this were my art, I would put it in ANS. So you had a lovely time at the party last night. Today, you're going over there and you're putting your XYZ in that populous tournament. Do it. Bye.
that works, and because it's that's all that sort of inspirational. Sometimes it's being the cute, pretty inspiration to give them the want to do it. Sometimes it's just pushing them a little harder to do it. So I like that. So I think to destigmatize this a little bit too, I want to, because that's I think a lot of this is what you're doing is you're destigmatizing, right? That's the sort of the goal of a lot of this, is to pull back the curtain and look at it for what it was, or what it even is now. Realistically, what you're doing as courtesans, as sex workers, as whatever, is no different than, I'll paint your shield, you make me a dress.
No, not at all. That's exactly what we're doing.
And I think that's really in what is, I think it's hard to see. Like, so I get it as a person who's dealt with courtesans, dealt with sex workers, and have friends who even mundanely are sex workers. It's, we all sell our bodies going to work every day, right? Whether I'm breaking my back, working in a machine or breaking my back in a bed. It's the same difference, folks. You're breaking your back, right?
Yeah. Although I feel like with sex work, it's a little bit more like it's more about caretaker. Like the stress is not so much physical, because people really focus on the physical side of it. But so much of what sex workers and we as courtesans provide is about an intangible social benefit, and someone to actually just focus on you and to really make you the star of the show and to put you at the center of their world, even if it is just for a little bit. But I think the payment actually is an important part of that, because it shows to the person that has value, that someone to value their, to push them and to keep them company, that those things have value. It also gives those of us who have skills in those more intangible sorts of fields a chance to trade our skills for something that we might not like. I cannot sew a dress in return for painting a shield, but I can keep you company at a party. And I think that also has value. So it's a way to sort of give value to intangible things that people can provide as well.
All right. Oh, I completely agree. So you mentioned a second ago about the sort of the social status in the company and sort of the idea of that. I think that's, I immediately thought back to Firefly. Anybody's ever watched Firefly? I think they did a really great job of personifying what sex workers were realistically or in could be now, because there was one of the times that Mal referenced that basically he couldn't land on certain civilized planets without Inara on the ship with him.
Yeah,
I was like, that's a neat concept to think about. Having that courtesan with him made him more reputable.
Right. Well, and it's in cases, and I'm not specifically sure on this with the Gisang, but in cases where the courtesan was technically employed by the state, whether as a slave or as an actual like worker, then that is a recognition of the state of the value of the courtesan. And so frequently they're very high status. If you're investing time and money in educating a courtesan in musical skills and dancing and things like that, she is an asset. And that's very much part of the like elevating those things and recognizing them. And so it's a different way of supporting ANS. But a lot of what we do is ultimately some form of supporting the arts and sciences within our society. If you want to get like right down to the brass tacks.
And historically, especially for cultures where there are gendered spaces, male versus female spaces, oftentimes your courtesans were, and this is really sad to say, most educated in male subjects. There's tons and tons of stories of lords or ladies being able to relate to their courtesan or escort better than their own spouses. Because, why does your wife need to know about politics? Or why does she need to know about this? Whereas a courtesan, especially if they are I guess taught by another courtesan or by the state, would know those subjects and be expected to have discourse on those subjects.
Yeah. So there's a particular sort of cultural activity that usually leads to the emergence of a really visible courtesan class, something that we sort of informally refer to as the rock star courtesan. And that basically means a time and a place when a courtesan could achieve fame and wealth on their own and be sort of a celebrity. So basically the cultural requirements for that are that women are forbidden or kept very strongly from public appearances, and that gender roles are very strictly enforced. And both those things working together means that men still need people performing feminine functions, but they cannot honorably have their wife come out and do those things. And that happens in several different cultures. It's definitely a feature in ancient Greece where you have the hetarai. It's less of an issue in Rome. So in Rome, the rock star courtesan is actually not as visible as people sort of maybe have the stereotype of. But in Muslim society, in period, that was very common. And also in the Venetian Renaissance or in the Italian Renaissance, you have all these guys out doing stuff and their wives are supposed to stay at home. So who hosts their parties? courtesans who, is out there. And so the courtesan occupies a sort of liminal space culturally between gender roles, where she performs female gender roles, but she does it in a male space. And that's sort of the recipe that makes that sort of elevation of the courtesan to that level of a celebrity possible. So like nowadays in modern America, obviously we don't have really rock star courtesans because women can go out and host parties for their husbands. They don't have that issue of having a space where you need a woman to do women things, but you don't have the availability of like nice girls to come out and do it. So that's sort of like it, that makes that sort of cultural arrangement makes the space that then is a vacuum. And we all know nature abhors a vacuum, even culturally. So people come in and they fill that role because that role is needed.
There you go. All right, so we are just over an hour, so let's get into a little bit of business, I guess. So you guys have a event we want to talk about. So let's talk about that. So the Gnome World Courtesans College. Tell me all about it.
So this first started last August for Penzic. Penzic was canceled and there was a vacuum there. So the Gnome World Courtesans did a Courtesans College for that week. And me being the fortune teller I saw that we would probably have Gulf Wars canceled as well. So we started planning a Courtesans College for Gulf Wars week. And we have a ton of different things. We start on this upcoming Wednesday and end on Sunday. And we have classes every single day. We actually have a luncheon meet every day for courtesans or, non-courtesans who just want to meet people to come eat in their lunch with, and several socials every day as well.
Yeah.
So we're trying to slip in there and, provide a little bit of the Gulf Wars experience, even though we're all still stuck at home, being responsible, good citizens and taking care of each other by staying the fuck home.
Stay at home, wear your masks. Don't do that.
Yeah. Wash your hands. Wash your hands. Please wash your hands.
Right. So, and I will get a link out to that on the Facebook page here in just a little bit. So we'll make sure we share that out. Definitely check it out. There's some amazing. The schedule looks great. I was looking over it yesterday. I'm super excited. I know I'll be busy this week, keeping an eye on what's going on. So
I'm actually really excited about it too. Gulf Wars is like my home more. Like as in, it is home. When I get there, I feel at home more than any other place on the earth. So I think it's also a really great chance to reconnect with people that you normally see at war. If you're feeling really like shut in and missing that. And we have so many great classes. And when Soo Yun first came up with the idea, she had a really awesome idea for doing like the lunch socials and things like that. So even if you just want to like pop in on your lunch break and just add a little fabulous to your day, we are here. We are here for you.
Yep. And yeah, definitely there's plenty of fabulous to be had. So all right. So I'll handle a little bit about business and we'll do some final thoughts before we close out the show.
Okay.
All right. So coming up next on Kalbardr's Corner. So next Sunday, of course, I have What Makes a Night. I'll be joined again by Duke Sean and Duke Uther from Glen Albin to discuss prowess. Yes, 8 weeks or 8 episodes in, we're finally talking stick, sort of a little bit. Just a little bit though. And then for the next Coffee with Kal, so I'm apparently this is my hot topics sort of month or two here. I did religion, and we did sex workers and courtesans. I'll be joined by Baron Thane Samson Muscovich for race in the SCA. So another sort of potentially controversial topic. Sammy's an amazing guest. I've been on shows with Sammy before, and just is another font of knowledge. And we'll have lots about the experience of being black in the SCA. It is something that I know is not easy from people we're talking to with Baron Logan, and he's done episodes on Ask the Knights as well. So I'll be interested to see what Sammy has to say about that. Yeah. But if you're looking for something a little more fun, go ahead, Lepida.
I was just going to say race also wasn't invented in the 60s.
It's true. Yeah, exactly. It's all about the disenfranchising the marginalized communities. I think this is this plays a lot in that, which is funny. I started with religion and going into the disenfranchised, since those two things often have a connection in a negative fashion generally, but we'll see. But if you're looking for something a little more fun and a little less heavy, This coming up Wednesday, I'll be joined by my good friends, my Westie Besties. Next Wednesday. For Passe Dice and Hazard. So it's another dice night. There will be prizes to be had and lots of drinking and nonsense for with me and my Westie friends and other guests, because I'm just going to bring on whoever I can that night, because we have some people that can't come and whatever. So anyways, come watch us roll dice and have a lot of fun with that and potentially win a prize. So when we gamble on the show, I make sure that we don't win anything, that our guests or that our audience wins stuff. So come look into that and, potentially win things. So
the house never wins.
The house never wins here. Because I don't. You clearly have not watched any of my gaming episodes, Lepida. No, I've never won a game on any show I've played. I can play games all day long off screen, and I will win most of them. I turn that camera on, and my luck goes out the window.
That's beautiful.
Thing. Yeah, I give it up. So I make sure my audience wins stuff because I can't. So. All right, and of course, last but not least, if you're interested in supporting everything I'm doing here on Kalbardr's Corner and everything we do with KK Productions and the 12 shows we sponsor now, look us up on Patreon. Oh, hold on, let me turn the banner off so I can see it. There we go. Patreon.com/KK Productions to get your name on the grand wall of patrons. Patrons. There you go. That was my really terrible reverb.
That was fantastic.
Thank you. I try. I've been working on that. So, all right, so. That's all I've got. We talked about the Courtesans College. We've talked about the Horticulture podcast. Definitely look that up. It's some amazing information out there. Look up No More Courtesans on the Facebook. So I think
everywhere. We have a Twitter. Yeah. We have everything.
We even have a Discord.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you're on technology, you can just look up No More Courtesans. You will find them.
Just remember the E on the end of known.
It's important. It's important. All right, so let's do a final thoughts. If you had to tell me one myth you wanted to dispel that we have not yet covered about being a courtesan, about courtesans in the SCA, what is one fact that we have not covered? Come on.
That we haven't covered?
Yeah, we haven't covered. Find me a good one.
That there are all kinds of power that you don't recognize how powerful they are. But once you do, you can start using a lot of small levers to move giant stones.
Ooh, I like that. I see. What you got? Give me a final thought.
Hers is going to sound so much better. But I'll talk about something kind of near and dear to my heart.
Sure.
It might be a myth out there that you have to be. So if you're on a spectrum, you can't be a courtesan. When actually the opposite is true. I'm on the A spectrum myself. I know several people who are on the A spectrum, and you don't have to be not ace to be a courtesan. In fact, it actually makes it more of a safer space for you if you're asexual, because you can,
We might have frozen. Yep. Okay. So it looks like we've frozen, or I think I've guessed is frozen. They're in the same house currently, so we may have lost them. Yep. Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and close the show out. I hope they're not still talking. I hope you guys can't hear them. So yep. Okay. So they froze. I'm still moving. So I'm here. So on that note, I'd like to thank my guests, even though they can't hear me currently. But so thank you, ladies, for joining me. You've both been amazing. There we go. They're both on. All right. So. I want to thank the No More Courtesans Guild and Domina, Lepida, and Minsuyan especially. I love this talk. This has been fun. And thank you all, of course, for joining us out there in the Facebook or YouTube land. As always, hold on. That is an empty cup, and I'm going to sign off. So this has been Lepida, Suyun, and Cal in Kalbardr's Corner. Have a good day, everybody.